Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
This is my 49th year in radio. I started with typewriters and newspapers and wire machines. Why are you telling us this, old man? Who cares? Well, I'm telling you this because I have always had an interest in talking about historical facts, historical stories about sports. And in the old days, you had to go to the library, look at the microfilm, Washington Post, Washington Star, New York Times. Had to look it up in books. Now, research takes all of 6 seconds with your fingertips. So if you are going to present something as historical, and nowadays, with arguments all part of the picture, you should have your facts straight, or at least come close, maybe a mistake here and there, but to base your argument on what Colin Cowherd did yesterday regarding Bill Belichick's induction into the Hall of Fame is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing stupidity, and it's mind-blowing laziness from someone who likes to brag about how hard he works. He went on a rant some years ago about Dan Patrick and the 4 producers, which he has with him on the set. They help him with various parts of the show, and they also work as sort of a sounding board, like 4 sidekicks. He does that show a little differently than most. I spent some of my career as a sidekick to Tony Kornheiser. I know what's involved in that. You make the host of the show the star, and you're there as a supplemental voice. He has 4 of them, but they all do work on the show, and that's not unusual for a national show of that size to have a staff of 4. Colin Cowherd may have more than that, but we never know because all we hear about is how hard he works. So yesterday, with the big storm about Bill Belichick not getting in the Hall of Fame, and it's remarkable how much it has dominated the news cycle ever since this came out late on Tuesday afternoon, that people are still arguing about it, talking about it, trying to find out how this was possible that the winningest Super Bowl coach of all time can't get in on the first ballot. What's going on here? So Cowherd decides to go the other way, supportive of the voters who didn't vote him in, which is perfectly fine. That's, kind of the job of a sports talk show host, is to look at where the wind is blowing and say, well, I might want to push back on that a little bit, which is absolutely, positively a good way to go if you are factually correct when you make your argument. So Cowherd, who makes millions of dollars a year, and, I'm not begrudging him that. Fox obviously believes that he is of that kind of value to the network, and they keep him employed. It's not my cup of tea, but obviously there's enough interest in what he does in that he has a career that is thriving, and good for him. We live in an era now, and I think Dan Patrick made this point 6-7 months ago. It's not so much about ratings on your show. It's about impressions, and it's about things getting out on social media that people pay attention to. It's the 2-minute take that people start to talk about. And that's what really makes you today. I mean, I've been in this radio business a long time where ratings were everything. I haven't heard a word about ratings books in years here. It doesn't matter for what we do. And I have friends at stations where it tends to matter, but not as much as it used to. One time I got some pretty good ratings bonuses. Don't get those anymore, but it's just a different world. So when Colin Cowherd has a hot take and he goes the other way, it's going to get out there, which is fine. And that's a good way to get attention to yourself and to the show and all those things. But you need to be factually correct. So while most of the sports world media was yelling about what an injustice, they shouldn't have a Hall of Fame at all if Bill Belichick isn't in. And I was on that side of the fence and still am. Cowherd going the other way, which is fine, as long as you are factually correct. So here was his argument why the voters were right to not put Bill Belichick in in the first year.
The winningest coach of all time, Don Shula, got to a Super Bowl with Dan Marino, David Woodley, and Earl Morrall. He had to wait 5 years until he was even eligible for the Hall of Fame. But because of a tweak this year in the voting, and I don't like this at all, coaches now can get in 1 year removed from being out of the league. So the greatest players can't, but coaches can? Is it possible that a handful of voters, 11, 12 voters, went timeout? The classiest guy ever, the winningest guy ever, the guy Belichick's been chasing forever, Don Shula, had to wait 5 years to even be eligible. And now because of a weird tweak, I got to put Belichick, who was a jerk forever. And that does matter. I'll get to that later. Some of these voters are writers. I'm going to put him in day one.
That is 1 minute and 3 seconds of incorrect manure. There's so many inaccuracies in that. Let's begin to count them up, shall we? First of all, his main point about Don Shula having to wait 5 years to get in. Don Shula was inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1997. His last year of coaching the Miami Dolphins was 1995. The only reason that he didn't get in 1996 was because he was only 65 years old, and Marv Levy coached into his 70s, and there was reason to believe that there might be another run for Don Shula someplace else. Miami was not his first stop. He had coached in Baltimore before that. And so after a year, they said, winningest coach of all time. Of course, we're going to put him in. He didn't wait 5 years, Colin. He waited one extra year. He got in 1997. As far as Shula getting to the Super Bowl with the quarterbacks he mentioned, well, Dan Marino is among the top 5 who ever played the position. So I wouldn't use that as an example of getting to the Super Bowl with a so-called, not up to par quarterback or whatever you look at it that way. To me, that's not a negative. You should get to a Super Bowl with Dan Marino. And in fact, if you want to make this argument, you could say that he should have gotten 2 more Super Bowls if he had Dan Marino. He did not. He got to 1 with Dan Marino in 1983 after the 83 season, coached through 1995. So 12 more years, never got back to a Super Bowl with Dan Marino. Earl Morrall getting to a Super Bowl. Well, yeah, Earl Morrall was quarterback for a good percentage of the season after Bob Greasy broke his ankle. And they only had to get to win 1 playoff game in those days to get to the Super Bowl. In the playoff game that they played against Pittsburgh, they put Bob Greasy in the game. Bob Greasy was back. So when they went to the Super Bowl, they were going with Bob Greasy. Conceivable Earl Morrall's season and the Dolphins season could have come to an end in Pittsburgh. Did not. So they get to the Super Bowl and they beat the Redskins. David Woodley, yes, he had Don Strock as well. It was a 2-headed quarterback, but that's not the point. But the tweak in the rule, which he said came in this year? No, it didn't come in this year, Colin. It came in, 1971. You know why the so-called tweak that you're talking about came in when the Hall of Fame, by the way, was only 8 years old? It came in because Vince Lombardi was dead. He had died, and no one was going to say Vince Lombardi shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. So they came up with the tweak that you're talking about. Not in 2026. No, Colin. 1971, 55 years ago, where Vince Lombardi got in the Hall of Fame 10 months after his death. So, you've got this big presentation that you're making. Research, unlike when I started doing it and had to go to the library and look through the microfilm, takes 6 seconds. You type in Don Shula, Hall of Fame. 1997. Don Shula coaching record. Last year coaching, 1995. So he didn't have to wait 5 years, did he? No, he did not. He did not. And the reason that some of these coaches wait And we'll get to more of his argument in a second, like Bill Parcells, who retired from the Giants at the age of 49 after winning winning 2 Super Bowls. He came back several more times. He coached again. He coached in New England. He coached with the Jets, and he coached with the Cowboys. And he kept coming back. And while it's not crushing to the Hall of Fame if a coach gets in a la Joe Gibbs and then comes back, they want to avoid that. They want to have the whole body of work before they put a coach in. And the coaches, have that 1-year waiting period because, hello, Colin, not because of a tweak this year, but because of something that they changed in 1971. So after trying to sell this manure to the audience, trying to sell an incorrect take based on facts that are not so, he has on Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson did have to wait a long time to get in the Hall of Fame, but Jimmy Johnson didn't coach that long. He coached only 9 years. True, he won 2 Super Bowls and is worthy of getting in the Hall of Fame, but it was the longevity, I think, that kept him out for a long time. And he looked at Bill Belichick, who he competed against, and said, hey, this is ridiculous. He should be in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. Said he even lost sleep over it. So he comes on yesterday with Colin, and Colin is trying to jam this incorrect nonsense down Jimmy Johnson's throat, and listen to how he responds.
My take is when a Lombardi or a Walsh or a Joe Gibbs or a Jimmy Johnson or a Parcells who won a Super Bowl with Jeff Hostetler and Sims, can you not argue, well, those guys had to wait. Why can't Bill? Isn't that a legit argument?
No, it's not. You're completely wrong, Colin, because coaches are a lot older than players. And you'd like to get the coach in before he's dead.
Yeah, Colin. And that's why they did it with Vince Lombardi, because he was already dead. So his 5-year waiting period, he would have liked to have waited 5 years. Unfortunately, he died less than a year after he finished his 1 season with the Washington Redskins. I mean, you talk about your hard work. Do 5 seconds of research. Look these things up. If you're going to make an argument, have some facts behind it that are true. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous what he said. And the one thing that really angers me about Colin Cowherd is that he never apologizes for this. He won't come back on his show. Oh, yeah, really screwed up yesterday. I said that Don Shula had to wait 5 years. He only had to wait 1. Joe Gibbs had to wait 5. No, Joe Gibbs didn't have to wait 5 years. Last year was 1992, and he went in, because I was there, in 1996. So it was 4 years, but the reason for that was there was an expansion team coming in Charlotte, and it was pretty well known that the Carolina Panthers, wanted to hire Joe Gibbs, who was based there with his racing team. And he actually had to wait to talk to them because he was still under contract with the Redskins, and Jack Cankut wouldn't let him do it. Again, a little bit of research. But to base your argument on Vince Lombardi having to wait 5 years when he waited 10 months, or his family waited 10 months, when Don Shula, the winningest coach of all time, had to wait 5 years, had to wait 2 years to get in. What are you doing here? What are you doing? And is there anybody who's an editor with the network, anybody who's overseeing programming, who's able to go in and maybe even during the show say to him, hey, Colin, you got that wrong. That's not what happened here. You're basing an argument on facts as you present them, which are totally, totally untrue. And, it's fine to say that you don't believe Bill Belichick should get in his first year. And with many of these coaches, there is no, definite 1 year waiting period. That's the minimum that they can have to get in. And Jimmy Johnson's right, because they're older. Sometimes these guys, Marv Levy, God bless him, he's 100 years old. But when he retired from the Buffalo Bills, he was in his mid-70s. Is he going to live to be 80? I don't know. They didn't know then. But that's why they do it. That's why there is a 1-year period. And there's not. I don't even know where you came up with this. Did you do any reading on this before you said there was a tweak that they put in this year for this? Did you do any work whatsoever? Whatsoever? And would I love to exchange paychecks with Colin Cowherd? Yes, absolutely. I'd like to do that. But I would be mortified to have somebody come up to me after the show or during the show and go, hey, yeah, Andy, Don Shula only waited till 1997, last year coaching, 1995. Yeah, Joe Gibbs didn't wait 5 years. It was 4, and it's only because he was going to come back. And these other coaches that you talk about waiting, well, 1988 was the year that Bill Walsh left the 49ers, and he got in 1992, so he didn't have to wait 5 years. But also, he was still coaching. He was coaching at Stanford. He missed coaching and went back to college football for a couple of years. And so there was reason, and who wouldn't want Bill Walsh if he wanted to come back to the NFL? That's all they were looking to avoid. And I think when they looked at Joe Gibbs, and the reason that they put him in at that time, because he's a young man. Joe Gibbs retired at 52. So Joe Gibbs was still in his mid-50s when he went in the Hall of Fame. And the reason that they finally threw up their hands and said, well, might as well do it now. I mean, he's got 3 Super Bowls, for God's sakes, and he's been out for 3 years here. And he's got this successful race team. He's already won the Daytona 500. This looks like he's made the transition to a new career, like a lot of coaches do. Not everybody coaches until they're in their late 60s or early 70s. Some of them make career changes, and he had successfully done that, so that's why they put him in. But for you to put up that as fact, you look like an imbecile. You look like a fool. And if you were new to the job, you would be out the door. If I was running the place, I'd say, you're that lazy that you didn't look that up before you based your whole argument on something that's absolutely 100% not true, factually incorrect? Amazing. All right, coming up, Coach Sig last night, or not last night, but the night before, doing his thing and doing it better than anybody's ever done it. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Before we get to Curt Cignetti and his snarkiest best, the national championship coach at Indiana, I feel something now as a Washington football fan. Now, it's true that's a 5-12 season that you're looking back on, but there was a corner turn, feels like last year was an aberration, that next year they can get closer to where they were in 2024. At least you hope so. And considering the way the organization is run now versus the way it was a few years ago before Dan Snyder was finally pushed out the door, there is hope for that. But it's kind of a cool feeling, whereas you would sit on your dilapidated front porch with the roof leaking and plumbing problems and look across the street and go, oh, boy, that house is a mess. And go, yeah, what about your house? It doesn't really feel that way anymore. True, it's only a 5-win season, but the reason that you are optimistic is you believe Jaden Daniels can get back to the form he had as a rookie, and that Adam Peters knows what he's doing, and Dan Quinn is a really good coach, and yada, yada, yada. But there are 2 franchises now that do not have a head coach. Not surprising about either one, the Arizona Cardinals and the Las Vegas Raiders. And Dominique Foxworth, who was a very good analyst with ESPN, played college football at Maryland, won a Super Bowl with the Ravens. He was on yesterday with Dan Patrick and was looking at the open jobs and explaining why they're still open.
The complaint that I've heard from candidates about the Arizona situation is commitment from the ownership. And that's always a big question, is what the ownership is going to do for an organization, or do for a coach to support them. And that's something that's been hanging over that organization. So someone will take that job. There are some jobs that aren't A-level jobs. And it feels like the Bengals fall into that category, despite the fact that they have a quarterback. And the Cardinals, one of the oldest franchises in football, also feel like one of those organizations that doesn't feel like an A-level job.
I was wondering about this, and may be crazy and off topic here, but say Matthew Stafford decides he's going to retire. Mm-hmm. The Rams, you got 2 first-round picks. Do you reach out to the Bengals What do you think?
Yeah. Reach out to the Bengals and offer those picks for
Joe Burrow,
their quarterback.
Yeah.
Shit. It's going to take more than that.
Okay,
man. So
that's a starter. That's a starter.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you can throw it at him, but I'm hanging up the phone if I'm the Bengals and you reach out for Joe Burrow for that. Like, I think for Joe Burrow to move, it's going to require him to force his way out, which is not a very unfootball. It's a very NBA style behavior. You rarely see football players force their way out, especially quarterbacks. But I can't imagine that there's enough compensation where it would not be received the way the Luka Doncic trade was received. If anyone moves on from their top level quarterback who's still in their prime, when quarterbacks are playing for 20 years, I know Burrow's been injured a lot, but moving on from your quarterback, you will lose everybody. Because you are then acquiring a bunch of draft picks in hopes that you can find someone nearly as good as Joe Burrow.
Yeah, but you get him on a rookie deal. It felt like there was a disconnect between him and front office, not happy. So I don't know. I just throwing it out there. It's the
dream. It's the dream, like Herschel Walker trade situation where you can set yourself up for a dynasty if you move on from a super talented player at the right time. Like, I get the idea, but it better work.
Yeah, well, I mean, it worked with Stafford, but that was a situation where he wanted out. You know, Joe Burrow hasn't made it public that he wants out, and the feeling was, well, Stafford's taken his lumps long enough in Detroit. It's finally time to get him to a place where he can win, and he did, and won a Super Bowl, got close this year. So that's not going to happen. Let me put it that way: Joe Burrow's not getting traded. If they trade Joe Burrow, this will go down. Yeah, he's right. It's the Luka Doncic trade times 12 because you can get superstar players in the NBA. Superstar quarterbacks, franchise quarterbacks, they are hard to find, really hard to find. And Joe Burrow, when healthy, I think may be the best quarterback in the league. And it just would seem to be impossible the way things work these days for Cincinnati to trade him. All right, Curt Cignetti still basking in the glow of winning the national championship. They had a really nice rally over the weekend at Indiana, even though it was freezing cold. He gave a speech. Players gave a speech. They brought out the championship trophy, the whole deal. And the party continued the other night as Indiana was taking on Purdue. Many years, Indiana's better than Purdue in basketball, but this year, Purdue's one of the top teams in the country, and Indiana's going through a transition season with a new coach. But Indiana pulls off the win, perhaps inspired by the players trotting out the trophy. And the one thing I noticed about Cignetti at these rallies is he's concise. So this was the extent. They did show a video tribute to winning the national championship in football, but Cignetti kept his remarks short.
I'd like to thank our great fans for carrying us through a 16-game season. We could not have done it without you. Let's have fun tonight. Go
Woo! Everybody's feeling good. And who would have thought that an Indiana basketball game would be not the warm-up act, but second fiddle to the celebration of a national football championship? If you would have said that 2 years ago when Cignetti was introduced and everybody sort of rolled their eyes when he said, yeah, we know Purdue sucks, but so does Ohio State and Michigan. Whoa, you kidding me? He said that at Indiana? Well, in 2 years, he lost 2 games and delivered a national championship. And shortly after the basketball game, when he was home, he was on a show called The Field of 68. It's hosted by Jeff Goodman, who's an Indiana alum. He covers college basketball, I believe it's for CBS, and also Stanford Steve, who works along with Scott Van Pelt and also does a lot of work with ESPN's game day shows on college football, former college football player at Stanford. And when they had Cignetti on, Stanford Steve asked this question.
Coach, did you give as much thought to the speech to the crowd tonight as you did the day you got hired?
Yeah, about the same amount. Went out there and winged it.
I thought about repeating a couple phrases, but I thought
we were waiting for it. We were waiting for it.
One of the guys that's been here a long time, Mark Deal. He's been here since like 1965, probably. He actually brought the bucket with him, to bring out with it. I said, Mark, we're a little beyond that now. We're just taking a national championship trophy.
124-3, you beat that team 2 years.
What's that?
You beat them 122-3 in 2 years. You beat them. They don't need to see the bucket. They know where it belongs.
I wanted to hear you say it again.
Two very SIG things. One, somebody from the administration brought out the old oaken bucket. I think the reason he did that is because they were playing Purdue, and that's what they give out at the end of the season. Purdue and Indiana always play the last game of the season in college football, and the winner gets to keep the old oaken bucket. A tradition probably goes back over 100 years. But Cignetti goes, no, we'll just bring out the national championship trophy. That's enough. And then when Stanford Steve said 122-3 was the combined score of the two games that Indiana has played Purdue the last 2 years, and Cignetti pretends not to hear. He said, "What'd you say?" And he repeated it again. He says, "Yeah, I know. I just wanted to hear you say it again." Classic. That was great. And here's a nice story. Hard to believe. I think we're at the anniversary or pretty close to it. Of maybe we just had it, of Kobe Bryant's death, which has been 6 years already. 6 years. Amazing how quickly time flies. The tragic helicopter crash, which took his life and his daughter's life. And they were traveling to a basketball game, a team that he coached, the Mamba Youth Girls team that his daughter was on. And the youngest member of that team, again, it's been 6 years, so Gigi would have graduated high. She'd be in college now, that's just a horrible thing. But the youngest member of the team, Amelia Holguin, is a senior in high school now. And you know that Kobe Bryant, in his last game with the Lakers, scored 60 points. She's obviously a great player. She's committed to play at Texas next year. And her high school, Sage Hill, was playing a school in Orange County. And she scored 61 points, 14 on three-pointers in a 101-26 win. She actually sat out the fourth quarter. She got all 61. The goal was to get to the 60 and then pass Kobe by one. She got to 61, and she did it. And then after the game, a la Wilt Chamberlain, held up a sign, a piece of paper with 61 written on it, pointing out what she did. And you just think about the legacy of that and the horrible tragedy of that, and Kobe Bryant dying at such a young age, and just as tragic as losing his daughter in the same crash. Oh, just horrible. But the legacy lives on, and other players have gone on to play college basketball, and she will now join them from a team that had a lot of promise, and many of the players were looking to play big-time college basketball and maybe even go and play in the WNBA. So a nice tribute from Amelia Holguin, 61 points in three quarters to cap off her senior night and pay tribute to the late Kobe Bryant. Okay, in the next hour, more on the Bill Belichick fallout from the Hall of Fame snub and some pretty good stories from Jerry Rice about the Super Bowl dynasty. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. The reaction to the vote was, what are you kidding me? Really? That's how the voting went? Oh, no, I'm not talking about Bill Belichick. I'm talking about something that happened 90 years ago today. The first Hall of Fame class for, I believe, was the first Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, was announced. Oh, yeah, it included Babe Ruth. It included Ty Cobb. But what do you hear about the voting? It's so interesting, 90 years later, what we're talking about here with Belichick not getting in and the reaction to the initial class for the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1936. Now, and I'll get to this, the Hall of Fame actually didn't open until 1939. So they made selections for the class of 36 that went in as a combined class with the class of 37 and 38 and 39. including, by the way, and you talk about the waiting period that you have for players, and Colin Cowherd incorrectly made an argument that coaches have to wait 5 years, and there was a so-called tweak this year for just a 1-year waiting period. No, actually, the tweak took place in 1971, Colin, when Vince Lombardi passed away. But don't let the facts stand in the way of some ridiculous rant that you've got there. But anyway, they combined it, and Lou Gehrig, who had announced on July 4th that the luckiest man speech, where it became known that he had this incurable disease which would take his life a couple of years later. They didn't want to wait, and they put him right in. Put him in 1939. I don't believe he made a speech, but I believe that his induction was part of what went on. And yeah, Babe Ruth. I think the way they did it was only the people who were voted in 1936 got to speak. We'll get to all that coming up, but there's a lot more reaction to what happened the other day when it was announced, or not announced, but leaked, that Bill Belichick is not getting into the Hall of Fame. Now, the official vote is still over a week away. We won't find out until a week from Saturday officially who gets into the Hall of Fame. There are other things that have leaked out since, like Eli Manning's not getting in for the second year in a row, if you believe the leak that's out there. But the Bill Belichick thing, people seem to know for a fact that he's not getting in. And it's stunning for a coach who won 2 more Super Bowls than anyone else, and is just short of Don Shula for most victories of all time. And Don Shula started it at a much younger age. I think Belichick was 40 or in his 40s when he took over the Cleveland Browns, and then was out as a head coach for a few years, working with Bill Parcells with New England and the Jets. So you can look at it that way too, but. That was something that caused a big stir yesterday, and we got a little bit of an explanation as one of the voters who did not vote for Belichick stepped forward. His name is Vahe Gregorian of the Kansas City Star, and what he pointed out is it's a convoluted process. And had he known it was going to work like this, he certainly would have voted him in, but there was only 3 votes for him and all the other voters for a total of 5 people, which also may include Bob Kraft, which is also a part of the picture, although Kraft said yesterday in a statement that he absolutely believes Bill Belichick should have gotten in despite the differences, perceived differences, as he put it, but clearly they don't get along anymore. But, maybe, and I pointed this out yesterday, that's a possibility. I have no idea. But, given the sway that Bob Kraft has with the league, I think he's 1A with Jerry Jones in the most important owners in football. He may have made it clear, hey, we got to make sure that I'm not going in the same year as Bill, because that's going to be too awkward for me. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that influenced the voters in any way. I think it's more transparent with what Gregorian says here about the way the process works, and hopefully they're going to blow it up and make it different. Sal Paolantonio, ESPN, based in Philadelphia, he's a part of this committee, and he was on with Dan Patrick yesterday explaining what went on behind the scenes and where he thinks this whole thing should go.
I can't talk to you about the process. I can just tell you what I did and what I considered. I voted for Bill Belichick as a first ballot Hall of Famer. I supported him as a first ballot Hall of Famer. Of course, when you're in this process, you do your due diligence for all of the candidates because A, that's your job, and B, this is their legacy, and you want to make sure you get it right. So I take it really seriously. And of course, I considered Spygate. I considered whether he was going to come back into the NFL. I considered whether it was more Brady than Belichick. All of those things went into my thinking. But in the end, Dan, I decided that his credentials and his accomplishments outweighed all of those things, making him a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, the procedure part is a little idiosyncratic because we had 2 votes. The first one was we had 3 seniors, L.C. Greenwood, Roger Craig, and Ken Anderson. They were the finalists. And then Bob Kraft as the contributor, and then Bill Belichick. And we were asked to vote for 3 of the 5. And in the end, according to the reporting, I'm not going to give away what I know about the vote. I don't really know much about the class. We're not told. It's supposed to come out at the honors ceremony next Thursday. Belichick didn't get the required votes. Whether that was members of the committee saying, you know what, I'm going to vote for my guy or for somebody else because I know Belichick's going to get the required votes. So I'm not going to waste my vote on Bill Belichick. And, I hope that's not what people were thinking. I don't know. But you have to ask somebody who didn't vote for him, because I voted for him.
Yeah, but I don't know if anybody's going to make that public.
No, probably not.
Should we make it public?
100%. We should make everything public. We live it, Dan. You have cameras in the courtroom. You have cameras everywhere. And I think, some people say, well, that will chill the debate. No, I think that will concentrate and focus the debate in the room. If you have cameras in the room, and by the way, sell it. And I've always said, come on, you could have a who wouldn't watch the Hall of Fame debate?
Well, this is what I've said for years. Put it on NFL Network.
Yeah.
Have it start at 10 in the morning and go to 6 at night. And it's like C-SPAN. C-SPAN's not very exciting, but there are moments that it is, and they're voting on some really serious stuff. I would love to have a little more transparency, and I would hope that those who didn't vote for Bill can at least explain why you didn't. And if you say Spygate, I'm fine with that. If you say that Deflategate, I'm fine with that. But I don't think you can look at Bill's resume and say he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Unless you're factoring in something that we don't know, and I was told the same thing you were, and that is Bill coming back to the NFL? Don't want to have somebody in the Hall of Fame who's still an active coach, and whether that's true or not, but I was just kind of surprised. Then Jimmy Johnson calling those who didn't vote for Bill cowards. Pretty harsh.
Let's tone down the rhetoric there. I don't think that that's the case. I think it's important. Let's look at the philosophy of what you just laid out. You and I are in agreement. I believe in the First Amendment. I believe in the Sunshine Law in Florida. All public records, public. Cameras in the courtroom. We want to hold public officials accountable. Certainly we want to hold Hall of Famers accountable. And the best way to do that, now you got to put a suit and a tie on and you're in the meeting and you have to make your case. And I would say it's not like C-SPAN, because I've been in that room. It's more like Prime Minister's question time. If you've ever seen that, you make your case and then people shout and moan and scream and then, they come right back at you, my right honorable friend and all that. I love watching Prime Minister's question time because it's a lot of fun and it's interesting to be. But that's philosophically and procedurally. But I'm a big believer, Dan, in doing what it takes to put people in the Hall of Fame, not keep them out.
Amen to that. It's a backlog. You got to put some people in. So I agree with Sal on that. Again, when this conversation took place yesterday, this is before Vahe Gregorian of the Kansas City Star, who is a Hall of Fame voter, and said that he did not vote for Bill Belichick, mainly because of the procedure, because he wanted to vote in the 3 senior player candidates and didn't have the opportunity with only 3 votes for 5 people to put Bill Belichick in. So it's the process more than anything else. And also said that the Spygate scandal had nothing to do with it. Now, here's someone on the other side of this who has an interesting angle. When all this Spygate stuff was coming out, and this was about stealing signs from the opposing defense, and I'm sure it helped Charlie Weiss in calling the offensive plays for the Patriots. That was all looked at and handled very poorly, by the way, by a brand new commissioner in Roger Goodell. I thought it was ridiculous. He said, well, we asked for the evidence and we destroyed all of it, so that way we knew if something else came forward, they were lying to us. But he wanted to sweep this under the rug. And one of the reasons he wanted to sweep it under the rug, because one of his big supporters to be promoted to commissioner was Bob Kraft. And there's reason to believe that Deflategate was sort of a payback for that, but you can believe what you want. But what came out in all of this was that the Patriots may have been spying on the Rams. This would have been Belichick's first Super Bowl, which was January or February of 2002 in New Orleans. And that, that may have had some influence because I believe the Rams were like 9-point favorites. Greatest show on turf. They, Dick Vermeil left. They had kept rolling. Kurt Warner and that offense was just unstoppable. And there was, a thought that New England, although Tom Brady's been really good, he's only in his second year. They're going to be no match for him. And they wind up with the Adam Vinatieri field goal, beating the Rams. And what should have been a dynasty was a one Super Bowl championship for Kurt Warner. But he was on yesterday with Rich Eisen, and understandably, I guess, if you think that this story is true of the Patriots spying on the practices of the Rams and using it to beat them in the Super Bowl is true, you can understand why he would be very militant about keeping a coach out if, in fact, he was guilty of cheating.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if anybody cheats the game or goes around the rules or does anything to gain an advantage over everyone else, that should be taken into account. I mean, that to me is what's great about competition. Is it's about going out there on an even playing field and seeing who can win in that situation. So I do believe, that if you have cheated in some form or fashion, that it should be taken into account at all times. But what does that mean? And as you said, how do we weigh that with all the different things that we've seen? What's too much but if we wanted to come out with a rule and say, hey, if you break a rule in terms of going above and beyond to get a competitive advantage, you can't ever be in the Hall of Fame. I could live with that. So everybody would know from this point forward, you get caught using performance enhancing drugs or, a cheating scandal, that's off the table for you. I could live with that. And now maybe, that stuff disappears and that's the choice that people make. I think what's hard now is how do you determine all of that, and what's enough to keep somebody out of the Hall of Fame, or, what's the level of it? Because I mean, even with this, with the Spygate, I've heard so many different things on so many different sides. I have no idea what really happened there. I have no idea the extent or, how little was really done there and what it affected. I don't know. And so I don't have the facts to be able to determine, what really went on, how much it did really help them. Did that have a huge impact on the success, all that stuff. And so without having any of that knowledge and knowing what you just said about the Hall of Fame and different people that are in the Hall of Fame, I think the bottom line is he has accomplished enough to be considered a first ballot Hall of Famer and should be in the Hall of Fame. And it doesn't make sense to me that he wasn't voted in yesterday.
His accomplishments are so vast and absurd that you even laugh feel the need to account them. Right. To actually use them to somehow, some way support a case for him being a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's how insane they are.
You're exactly right. I mean, you look at, I think, again, Tom Brady coming up in a few years, all you got to do is say the name and it's like, yeah, he's in,
unless they ascribe the same standard.
No, you're right. Unless that's right. Why. But I mean, the same thing with Bill Belichick. I mean, I think we all just thought, oh, you just say the name, he's a lock. Let's move on to the next guy type of thing. And so, yeah, it's crazy, I think, to all of us that are involved in the game that it went down this way.
That's Kurt Warner yesterday with Rich Eisen. And one of those guys whose name comes up with the Modern Era Committee, and they look at him on the first time he's eligible, was Jerry Rice. Anybody want to dissent Jerry Rice being in the Hall of Fame? No, I don't think so. Jerry Rice has always lapped the field as a wide receiver in that dynasty with the San Francisco 49ers. Jerry Rice, 3 Super Bowl championships as part of the 49ers dynasty. He was on yesterday with Rich Eisen with stories to tell. He's wearing a Super Bowl ring, which Rich points out Surprising to me because of the game that he had in his last Super Bowl where he just obliterated the Chargers. Was it 6 touchdown catches or 5? I mean, it was unbelievable performance in that Super Bowl, but that's not the ring that he wears. And you'll hear about that and other stories of the days of the 49ers when they had and you know, I don't think this discredits Jerry Rice in any way. They made each other better, but he played with two of the best. He played with Joe Montana and Steve Young. How's that for a succession of quarterbacks? That'll never happen again. But he did benefit from that, and they benefited from him. I think all three are Hall of Famers because of each other, although Montana had a lot of career before Rice came along, and Rice was later. Joe Montana was already I believe a 2-time Super Bowl champ by the time Jerry Rice came in the door. So this was Rice yesterday with Rich Eisen talking about the dynasty that they had and the genius behind it. Bill Walsh, who was actually, most coaches do it now, but he was the first one to script the first 15 plays.
That was amazing because now it's like the players, they have something to go off. And to be honest with you, it was like I'm already playing the game in my head the night before. I'm putting myself in those situations where I know what I have to do and how I can impact the game. So those 15 plays, they were very important, and I think it really got us off to a great start. Then after that, you know, you have to make adjustments and do all of those things. But, you know, the platform was already pretty much, it was already built right from the start. And I think that's why we won so many games.
One of my favorite stories, Jerry Rice, while we're sharing stories, is when I would work the combine with Dion. And we would show video of the defensive backs in the weight and reps room putting up 225. And he just was like, what are we doing this for with the defensive backs? And I'm like, well, everyone's got to go through these tests. And he goes, I never had to put Jerry Rice across my chest and lift him, is what he would say. You know,
Dion was the guy. He was like, he told me during a game, he said, Jerry, look, man. He said, if they run the ball, you don't have to block me because, hey, they don't pay me to tackle.
He said that during the game? Are you serious?
He said it during the game. And I was like, I said, okay, Dion, I'll just run you off then. I just, every run play, I was just sprinting downfield and he was just chasing me. He didn't want to tackle.
He just wanted to save you guys some steps, right?
Yeah, like, you know, come on.
Oh, man.
They don't pay me to do that.
That is so funny. And then, of course, he became a teammate of yours.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
man. He was that guy, that missing piece that we needed to get past Dallas. We needed that shutdown corner, that one-on-one guy, and he came in. And the thing about Dion, too, he was so surprised about the standard of the 49ers and how we prepare every day. He said, you guys practice like this every day? I said, yeah, we always practice like it's a game situation. And he said, wow, okay. Then he bought into it. Then Dion got, he got better too. And then we were able to, beat Dallas and win that championship. Then he went to Dallas.
That's right. That's what he was like, yeah, right? Like he was a hired assassin at some point of his career.
He came in for a split second. I think he met Eddie DeBarlo down in the marina in San Francisco. They signed a deal there. He helped us win that championship. Then he went on to Jerry Jones.
Yeah, that's what happens. What ring is that on your hand? Which one is that?
This is Super Bowl 24 against the Denver Broncos.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that one mean to you?
55-10, and I get asked all the time. They say, okay, when you go to your first Super Bowl, you remember what that felt like. Does it change when you go to your second one? No. I was just as scared as the second one. I was just as scared as the third one, because you only get one shot. You only get one opportunity. And someone is going to win, someone is going to lose. And I always tried to be on that winning end.
Well, he didn't play scared, and everybody remembers the touchdown pass in his first one to beat Cincinnati. He didn't catch it, but he set it up. He was great in Super Bowls. He didn't play scared. Jerry Rice, still the all-time leading receiver, and that's really remarkable when you look at the numbers that receivers have these days. That he last played probably close to 20 years ago. And he still holds the record. Yeah, that's putting it out there, which he did. This is an interesting follow-up. I've been looking at this story off and on for the last few years. This is not Shedeur Sanders, but Shiloh Sanders, who played on the Colorado team. He was a defensive back. I don't think he was drafted, but he was signed by Tampa Bay. They didn't keep him, so he didn't play in the league this year. And who knows whether he's going to play football again. But there is follow-up from something that happened in high school. Now, Deion ran this phony baloney high school so he could coach the team, and the school's been shut down. But he had a security guard there. And Shiloh, who is the founder's son and the son of the football coach and star and everything, he had an altercation with a security guard named John Darjean. And it was about confiscating a phone. And allegedly, Shiloh didn't want to give up the phone, and there was a physical altercation, and Darjean was hurt in this, and he sued him for over $11 million. And this thing went through the courts, and they looked at what happened there, and his parents, Deion's parents, were dropped from the lawsuit. But the lawsuit went forward, and Shiloh just didn't show up. He didn't show up in court, so the judgment was granted to Darjean. So now they go to collect, and it was over $11 million. It was $11.8 million, the default, and they go to collect, and so Shiloh declares bankruptcy. So now the bankruptcy case is going through the courts, and bankruptcy judge Michael Romero denied it the other day, setting the case on course for trial, which has been, more than 2 years in the making since he declared bankruptcy in October of 2023. And this could go forward, and ultimately there could be a judgment of close to $12 million against Shiloh Sanders. And Darjean is accusing him of severely and permanently injuring him after, again, trying to take the phone more than 10 years ago. And, this is not something that could easily go away, because the fact of the matter is the Sanders family has the money. Would the rest of the family have to declare bankruptcy? I don't think so. But once the parents were removed from the suit, it was like, okay, well, I'm off the hook. I don't have that kind of money. But not showing up could cost you here, and we'll see where this goes. This has now been moved to next month. They're going to have another hearing on this, and it's not over yet for Shiloh. He still could be on the hook in this case, a judgment case, which he could cost him close to $12 million. Insane. Coming up today, 90 years ago today, the first Baseball Hall of Fame class, and not without controversy. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
90 years ago, baseball was the American pastime. There was no other sport that was close. Actually, the other two sports that drew interest were horse racing and boxing, which both of them have virtually disappeared. We pay attention to horse racing 3 days a year, but other than that, nobody's looking at horse racing. But baseball was it. And Babe Ruth was Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, LeBron, any GOAT that we call him now, any GOAT wrapped into one. I mean, he was it, Babe Ruth. And they had the vote for the initial Hall of Fame class. Baseball came to the idea that, hey, we have now a history. Baseball had started in the 1860s, and in the first part of the 20th century, the sport was booming, and it was led by Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth, in many ways, brought baseball out of the scandal, the Black Sox scandal of 1919. Nobody had ever seen anything like this. So when he hit 60 home runs He broke his own record, which had shattered the previous record of like 29. I mean, it was just unbelievable what he had done to something that was, a once in a week occurrence, and made it, more of a regular thing. And it was, people couldn't believe how important Babe Ruth was to baseball and the culture. He was the most famous athlete in America. He had signed a contract during the Depression for $80,000. $80,000 was mind-blowing. It was probably as mind-blowing then as the Juan Soto, and I don't think this is hyperbole, as the Juan Soto $756 million deal last year. Because, we've already been talking about millions in the past, and we got Shohei at 700. So when Babe got to 80,000, wow. I mean, that was like twice as much as the president, and Babe famously said, I had a better year, which he did. He had 27 home runs. So, I mean, it was 1927, he'd hit 60 home runs, which was thought to be, a record that would never be broken. So anyway, they get around to the initial class. Now, the rules were this. They were only considering players who had started their careers after 1900. It was later amended, but they were thinking, that's ancient history. Even though Cy Young had over 500 wins spilling over into the 20th century, a lot of his career had taken place in the 1800s. So he was not voted to the initial class. There were 226 ballots cast. They could select up to, on the ballot, 10 players, and they would take the top 5. The top 5 turned out to be, of 226, the closest to unanimous was Ty Cobb. Now, baseball has bylaws for the Hall of Fame, which are different than football, and it considers character. And Ty Cobb was a known racist, and also there had been a number of incidents during his career of meanness. There was a story of him going into the stands and beating up a fan, which prior to cell phone cameras, I guess you could get away with it. They didn't have any cameras then, other than still cameras. And he went into the stands, as the story is told, and he's beating up on a fan, and somebody goes, hey, wait a minute, he doesn't have any hands. And Ty Cobb looks up and goes, I don't care if he doesn't have any feet, and continues to pummel him. Mean guy, great player, got the most votes, 222 votes. Babe Ruth got 215, as did Honus Wagner, but on one of the ballots, Babe Ruth's name was completely left off. You could vote for 10 guys. One guy decided not to vote for Babe Ruth at all. I mean, think about that. That's incredible. But he and Honus Wagner tied for second with 215 votes, 95% of the votes. Christy Mathewson got 205 votes, 90%. And Walter Johnson got 189 votes, over 83%. So that was the initial class. Now, the Hall of Fame itself was not completed until 1939 in Cooperstown. So you had subsequent classes, and they got around to looking at Cy Young and said, wait a minute, 501 wins or 510, he's got to get in. So he got in. Rogers Hornsby got in, Mickey Cochran, Napoleon Lapage, and Tris Speaker. So by the time the Hall of Fame had its first induction ceremony on June 12th of 1939, it was a pretty sizable class, including Lou Gehrig, who only Lou Gehrig, that's right. He would not have been in that induction because the Luckiest Man speech took place on July 4th. So this was a couple of weeks before that, but it was known that he wasn't going to play again, and they had voted him in. I guess he didn't participate in the ceremony, and only the 5 who did. And to give you an idea of how speeches have gotten interminably long, Babe Ruth got it. Like, this is his entire induction speech. This was June 12th of 1939 as the initial Hall of Fame induction ceremony took place in Cooperstown, New York. And this is Babe's entire speech.
Babe Ruth, the Bambino.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I know the old boys back in there. We were just talking it over. Some have been there long before my time. They got on it, and I worked hard, I got on it. And I hope that the coming generation, the young boys today, that they'll work hard and also be on it. And as my old friend Cy Young says, I hope it goes another 100 years, and the next 100 years will be the greatest. And I'm surely glad, and it's a pleasure for me to come up here and be picked also on the Hall of Fame. Thank you.
We can debate whether the next 100 years will be the greatest. That's not quite 100 years, but certainly a man who made an enormous salary at $80,000 would be shaking his head at $756 million today. But speeches now, I don't even know if they have a limit at the Baseball Hall of Fame. In the Football Hall of Fame, they're supposed to have one, but we've had guys go on for like 25 minutes. That's the way to do it. Short and sweet. I don't know if he wrote it out. But that was it. Thank you very much, and hope baseball continues. And talking to the fellas, they used to say fellas in those days. Yeah, that was pretty good. So, you look back on that, and there was an editorial that was written in the New York Times about this. That hey, what do you mean Babe Ruth didn't get all the votes? What do you mean he only got 215 votes out of 226? What are you kidding me? And even then, there was that, and some of it was grudges by sports writers. Curiously, none for Ty Cobb, or at least not enough. He wasn't unanimous, but he got the most votes. And Walter Johnson, who was beloved by the media, particularly he was great friends with Shirley Povich, and I don't think we'll ever see maybe you can look at Cy Young's numbers and Walter Johnson's numbers. Cy Young won about 100 more games, but the game was so much different than it was by the time Johnson finished his career in the late 20s. I think 27 was his last year, that you have to look at the numbers differently. And I think you could make the case that Walter Johnson was the greatest pitcher of all time, greatest right-handed pitcher anyway, and they got a high school named after him here. One other baseball story, which I meant to get to yesterday, a follow-up Tom Lavero column on the trade of Mackenzie Gore for prospects. And, Tom has been very critical of ownership, not spending money. And he said, they built this core of players. Some of them are great draft picks. And it's possible they're not going to keep any of them. And he talked about, C.J. Abrams, who says so far they're not interested in trading him. But you don't know. He came in the Juan Soto deal. And he writes that President Paul Taboni and the general manager, whose name I can't pronounce, Colombi, I believe, Endura Colombi, understand, after all, that prospects are the kind of players their bosses, the Lerner family, love the most. They don't cost much, but prospects get fans of losing teams like Washington excited because they're invisible. They haven't failed yet. Hall of Fame pitcher Jim Palmer said it best about prospects. He said, "I've been around baseball for 60-some years, and what I've found is even your best prospects are suspects until they come to the big leagues and prove that they can play." And he goes on to talk about James Wood, who will have to get a deal done after the 2028 season before he becomes eligible for free agency after 2030. And who knows how things get moved up. I'm inserting this because there's a possibility we won't even have a season in 2027 because of the labor situation. But Tom writes, Wood's departure may hurt like Juan Soto's did. Coming off an all-star season with 31 homers and 94 runs batted in, he could prove to be on that level. All of them are represented by agent Scott Boras, who never advises his young stars to sign contract extensions with their existing teams. He refers to them as sniff contracts. Well, the one exception that I can think of is Steven Strasburg, and even that allowed him to get to free agency at just the right time after winning the World Series MVP. They gave him $240 million, and that turned out to be a disaster. But as he writes at the end of his column, the clock is ticking on C.J. Abrams, a 2024 All-Star shortstop. The sound of time passing for Wood, James Wood, is deafening. So, it's kind of like a warning shot, the trade of Mackenzie Gore for prospects, but more could be coming. So there's that. But he does strike out a lot. He could be Juan Soto, but Juan Soto, at least when he first came up with the Nats, was better than James Wood. And you could also say, well, he was playing for a better team. True. The year that he came up, they were a playoff team, and then the next year they won the World Series. So in his second year, James Wood has not matched what Soto did, but again, he's not playing for a team that went to the World Series, playing for a bad team. It's frustrating. I'm still of the mindset, because I'm so old and went without baseball for so long, over 30 years, that I'm still kind of happy to have a team, but I'd like them to contend. And I also am of a mindset looking at other fan bases. We got a World Series in 2019. You shouldn't satisfy you, and when you go to the game, you should have a product that you think can be a winning product. But considering that there's 90 years without a World Series in Washington, pretty cool. 95 years, I think. 94, 95 years. Just amazing. Anyway, that does it for me. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.